thank you all who are joining this webinar today. It's brought to you by the RTOERO Foundation. My name is Mike Prentice. I'm the Executive Director of the Foundation. The mission of the RTOERO Foundation is to invest in programs, research, and training to support healthy, active aging for all Canadians. We envision a society in which all seniors live with dignity and respect. Before we get started into the presentation, we're just going to read our land acknowledgement. And Deanna is just putting that up on screen. Thank you, Deanna. So we acknowledge, recognize, and honor the ancestral traditional territories on which we live and work, and the contributions of all Indigenous peoples to our communities and our nation. Okay, so we are very excited to have a team of three with us today. Actually, the folks you're seeing up on screen, Dr. Gail Lowe and Dr. Gloria Gutman, who I will more properly introduce in a moment. We're also joined by Hunena Alana, who is on Drs. Lowe and Gutman's team. Just very quick housekeeping. Today's presentation will follow our usual format. Dr. Lowe and Dr. Gutman will walk us through a presentation about their project, and after that, we'll be available to answer questions from the audience. We have an hour together today. So as always, we ask that when we get to the Q&A portion, to please make sure you type your questions into the Q&A, not in the chat. We're only looking to the Q&A list of questions to respond to those. So you'll see the Q&A button either on the bottom or maybe on the side of your screen, depending what type of device you're using today. And we'll get to as many questions as we can in the hour that we have. So today's webinar is titled Mentally Healthy Living After Social Distancing. This is our the Foundation's third webinar of 2022. What we're doing today is a little bit different than we've done in past. So I'm just gonna spend a minute sort of providing some context there. So in past, we have had webinar presentations often from our past grantees, so organizations who received a grant from the RTOERO Foundation and who have joined us on a webinar to present results of their work after the project has ended. Those projects which are funded by the Foundation, of course, that funding is made possible by our donors, by our generous, loyal donors, the majority of whom are RTOERO members. And we know a lot of our donors are in the audience today. So thank you once again for supporting the Foundation and making all our grants and all our work possible. Dr. Lowe and Dr. Gutman are in fact the newest recipients of an RTOERO Foundation grant for their project, Mentally Healthy Living After Social Distancing. So because this is a grant that was just recently awarded, Drs. Lowe and Gutman are just starting into the early stages of what promises to be a very interesting and very important project. So what we're doing today in the interest of information sharing and stewardship, we have Drs. Lowe and Gutman sharing with everyone today what is so special about this project, why we're all so excited about it. And then we are going to ask them to come back for another webinar when the project is complete and report back to us on all of the results. And that'll be, a while out. This is a substantial and important project. So we will definitely hear from them again. When we at the Foundation read this project proposal from Drs. Lowe and Gutman, we were immediately excited. We felt it was such a great fit with our priorities, what we focus on, such an important initiative to support. And so we wanted to share that excitement with RTOERO members and other stakeholders, and of course our donors, who are the ones that make these grants possible. So let me introduce our presenters today, and then we'll get into their presentation. Dr. Gail Lowe, I had to sort of cherry pick some pieces because these are substantial, impressive bios. So I'm just sort of pulling out a couple of pieces, and please, Hunena and Gloria and Gail, correct me if anything is incorrect here. Dr. Gail Lowe is an associate professor, Faculty of Nursing at the University of Alberta. She has an MA in Gerontology from Simon Fraser University and a PhD in nursing from the University of Victoria. Dr. Lowe is a researcher with 17 years of experience, is on the Canadian Journal of Nursing Research editorial board. And her research focuses on quality of life, psychological well-being at midlife and in older age, as well as physical and mental adaptations to aging. Currently, she serves as a reviewer for a number of international journals and is also a grant reviewer for the Canadian Lung Association and Canadian Thoracic Society and the Nova Scotia Health Research Foundation. That's Dr. Lowe. Dr. Gloria Gutman, also with us today. We're seeing everyone on screen. Dr. Gloria Gutman is a professor emerita at Simon Fraser University, where she served as director of the Gerontology Research Center and department chair for 24 years. During her career, Dr. Gutman has had a number of high-profile roles, including 2 terms as president of the Canadian Association on Gerontology, president of the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics, and president of the International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse. You can becoming pretty clear sort of why we have these amazing folks with us today. Dr. Gutman currently is president of the North American chapter of the International Society for Gerontology. And she has been awarded the Order of British Columbia, and she was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal from the Government of Canada, and was appointed to the Order of Canada, which is the country's highest civilian honor. So we also have with us Hunena Alana, who is part of the project team with Drs. Lowe and Gutman. Hunena is a recent graduate of a Master in Nursing, Teaching and Learning stream from the University of Alberta. She is internationally educated as a registered nurse and has worked as a lead instructor at Makemie College in Edmonton and on research projects related to mental health, aging, and nursing. I hope I got that right, everyone, and didn't skip over too much, because there was a lot more. Anyway, enough from me. Gail, Gloria, Hunena, we are so thankful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing excitement and information about this project. I will now turn the presentation over to you.
It's an extreme pleasure to be here talking to you about this project. And during this presentation, we want to take you down this road of thinking and coordinating and meeting and writing and reflecting. It's been such an exciting time. So this is just a absolutely wonderful opportunity. So the title of our study, of course, is Mentally Healthy Living After Social Distancing, a study of older Canadians. So next slide. As Mike had mentioned previously, what a pleasure to have such a talented group of people working together. And we have others on our team that I wanted to draw your attention to, aside from Dr. Gutman and Ms. Alana. We also have Dr. Donna Wilson, who is joining our team. She has a specialty knowledge in end-of-life care, and with that, being an advocate for the mental and physical well-being of older Canadians across the country. And she certainly has a vested interest in doing research in relation to social inclusion, which heavily pertains to our project. She's very much interested in social inclusion from the perspective of healthcare service use and access, and the helpfulness of that service, and also opportunities to engage with society at a level such as through paid work. Dr. Gail focuses on health strategies or ways that people can stay physically and mentally well, and also risk factors that might impact a person's health. Dr. Gao is very much interested in survey research. And Mike has introduced both myself and Dr. Gutman. And Dr. Gutman and I have worked together previously on a number of different research works related to the quality of life and mental well-being. So it's a pleasure to have Dr. Gutman bring her expertise in relation to mental and physical health promotion and service use as well. We have some formidable scholars from Brazil who would be assisting us to do a very unique analysis of our information that we gather in this study. These 2 scholars focus on building spider-type webs around things that impact a person's mental health, or things that indicate a person's mental health and well-being. So it's a very interesting group of investigators from Brazil. We have Chef Collis Cog, who specializes in food research and creation, who's joining us as well. And you'll learn more about why his expertise is sorely needed in this project. We have Alison Lamantia, who is working with us. She specializes in media and storytelling of working groups that come together with a strong purpose to move forward and promote the health and well-being of Canadians across the country. Wendy Ha, who will be sharing what we have learned as well through articles to the general public. Wendy has a passion for writing about food as well and health in later life. So she's a wonderful complement to the team. And Miss Alana, of course, we're grateful to have her on board as our project coordinator. Next slide, please. So when was I thinking about this project? Well, it's very strange. It came to mind, well, as we had the declaration for the pandemic from the World Health Organization mid-March. I was sitting at my desk sending out some emails, and I saw this message come into my inbox, and my jaw dropped. I gasped. I was just in shock and dismay at the announcement that we were facing a global pandemic. And at the time I was working and I was leading a couple of courses with a colleague, and the university had just said, shift everything online. We cannot teach in person anymore. And I had a very busy weekend to get that in play. And with that, I had a million questions swirling around my head. Questions that came to mind. Is this permanent? How did this happen? What will Justin Trudeau do? How are people being affected around the country? It's stressful and anxiety provoking. And am I the only one feeling this way? Am I overreacting? Am I panicking? What's going on? And I live in Alberta. I live in Edmonton, and my family's in BC, and I was away from them. And my stress level was really soaring as I was beginning to wonder, oh, what will happen to my family? Will they be okay? And then something just happened. All of a sudden, at the end of the day, just breathe and focus. So there I was. What was I going to do? I had to do something, but I had to be still and think. So I pulled out my Vitamix machine and I started blending. I blended at the end of my workday. I'm a foodie. I love food. And it seemed to be the only thing that I could do that was somewhat predictable at the end of that day. So I knew what ingredients I wanted to put in my blender. I knew how many minutes I was going to blend, and I just let the blender go, and I sat outside and I listened to the noise of the blender, and that was all I could hear. There was just deafening silence outside. It was absolutely haunting. I felt sick to my stomach, and I just thought, what can I do? What can I do? What's happening out there? A lot of ideas swirling through my head. So I just started asking myself questions, frankly, questions that Siri couldn't answer. So as I enjoyed my blended meal from my Vitamix, I was sipping slowly, I was thinking, I was looking outside, the streets were quiet, I was reflecting, and I began to ask myself 3 key questions. I asked myself, how can I feel useful as a researcher? I have some skills that I can use. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a physician out there on the forefront, but there must be something that I can do. So naturally, the second question I asked myself was, what can I do to reach people during this pandemic? I started thinking more and thought, food, comfort, this Vitamix, this food that I'm tasting, it brings a sense of calm to me. So wait, food, calm? Okay, there's a way to put these things together. There must be a way. So that was my initial inkling around this project. And the next thing I asked was, well, who can help me with this? You can't work alone. Who can I ask to help me? So, of course, email. I reached out to my colleagues, Dr. Gutman being one of them. I knew I couldn't sit still. I knew I wanted to do something. The question was what? So bringing many heads together is better than just thinking on your own. Next slide, please. So when I was thinking and I was reading, and I was doing a lot of reading, and I came across the work of a psychologist named Stephen Hobfall. And Stephen specializes in how people repair themselves when they experience a large-scale unexpected event, particularly events that have a global significance. And I read his work, and I was reading and thinking, and Stephen's words resonated with me. The idea isn't to fix things. The idea is to think and find people that you can work together with. I wasn't an EMS responder. I hadn't been through a pandemic before. And quite frankly, I didn't know anyone who had. I just had the sense of restless about me. So I did more walking and more thinking and more reading. And I came to realize through reading sentiments about experts around the globe that community groups can work together to bring what we call small wins. You're not going to fix or turn the pandemic away. That's not going to happen. But what can you do to make a difference during this time? That would be the important thing. What can you do to have a small scale win in this big battle that we're facing? So I read more. I read that community-based education and awareness raising is important for our health, our mental health, our physical health, and that when you engage in community-based actions with people, that you can feel less isolated and more connected and part of a community that looks forward to staying healthy and also recovering. So that became my mantra. And well, with social distancing, okay, who is my team? I can't go and fly to British Columbia and say, hi, Gloria, let's sit down and have coffee. That's not happening. Wow, we're in a new normal now. So I considered this team that I had connected with, Dr. Gutman, Dr. Gail, Dr. Wilson, and myself, and Hunena as a community. And we began to build a community around us and think about what we could do, what was going on with COVID, how are people being affected. And we were interested in the psychosocial impact of things. We were interested in doing a project that would help us connect everyday Canadians during this pandemic that we're having. And as we're moving into phases of recovery, as public health measures are lifting, I think this project is really timely. We're interested in doing something. We want to make a difference. We want to find a way to reach out to others to help them feel a sense of connection, to make a difference. That's vital mental health recovery work. That is what we're aiming for. So this project is certainly very important and very timely.
With the pandemic sort of hopefully winding down, and at least the social distancing requirements being somewhat lifted, we're not having to wear a mask absolutely everywhere. We're not totally terrified about being with people, but still we really have to start thinking about what life is going to look like post-pandemic. It probably will not ever be exactly the same. In some ways, that's good. We've learned to use, many of us have learned to use Zoom. We've learned more about these electronic communication devices than we ever thought we wanted to know. And that's been the upside. But on the downside, we know that some people were quite isolated and lonely. If we could have the next slide. Many people were dealing with stress. They were anxious before the pandemic. And we know that this is not going to disappear all of a sudden. So people who were isolated and lonely before are experiencing even more so now in the pandemic. But we need to sort of begin to think about how do we reconnect with society. We have the next slide, please. So we have to figure out, like, what can we go back to safely? I know I used to have concert tickets. I went to concerts, I went to plays, I went to all kinds of public events, which I'm just now beginning to go back to. As an older adult and reading the statistics, I'm concerned about being with too many people in a confined space. But still, I want to start to go back to my activities and to start to be able to be face to face with people other than with the screen between us. And, about a year into the pandemic, it was very clear that social isolation was a major driver of poor mental health in older people, that people were getting depressed from being alone and from not being able to go to the activities that they used to before. Next slide. Now, people have been inventive, researchers, practitioners. So there are online mental health supports that various experts have developed. But if you're like me, you find that it's been like an explosion, a flood of virtual information. And it's hard to know what's good and what isn't. And, we hear about misinformation, we hear about disinformation. So it's really hard to sort out who really knows what's going to help me as a person or my friends or my colleagues. And especially when it comes to knowing where and when and how to access help if I feel like I'm really getting to the point of needing it, where I can't cope on my own. Next slide. Also, when you look at a number of these mental health tools that they've put on the internet for us, it's really not tailored to the needs of older people. For one thing, amongst the hats that I wear is as the chair of the North American chapter of the International Society for Gerontology. So I have some tech savvy, but I'm not as swift as I would like to be, or as swift as the kids. So that's one piece of it, just getting the information, knowing which darn icon I have to click on, or how many clicks to get to the form to fill out to be able to access some particular person or some source of help. And so it's the methods aren't necessarily tailored to the needs of the older adult, and the message as well. And, are they really saying to me the things that I want to know about how to deal with my life on a day-to-day basis, on the days that I'm feeling a little blue or a little down? And especially for people who live alone and who generally tend to be extroverted, like to be with other people, it's been tough because you can't go to the gym, or you can't go to the library, or you can't go to the activities where you volunteer, which many older adults do, and they contribute tremendously to Canadian society, at the same time contributing to their own mental health. So we really need to have information that is realistic, that's easy to understand, and that where there's a good chance we're going to follow it. So next slide. And so what we want to do is really find out from older Canadians how they've coped successfully. What are the things that worked for them? for me, I go out every day, rain, shine, snow, whatever. I live in Vancouver, so it's mostly rain in the wintertime. But I put on my raincoat, I put on my boots, I get my umbrella, and I have learned to take my phone with me because it has a pedometer. And so I do 6,000 steps a day. I walk around, I know my neighborhood better than I ever wanted to know. I know what the new houses are. I know who isn't mowing their lawn. Sometimes I go right, sometimes I go left, but I walk for an hour every day. So I'm in better physical shape than I've ever been before. Now I just need some friends to share it with and to be able to go dancing or to be able to go out with people where we can talk to each other and share what we've found works for us. And that's really a major goal of this project. Next slide. So we want to discover the strategies that older Canadians have used during the pandemic and to particularly to reduce anxiety, stress, and the other things that go along with being lonely. Next.
So yeah, this is a wonderful purpose to have in mind. And we want to make this information reader friendly and certainly accessible. Those are really key things to think about. So you want to discover and generate knowledge, but you also want to share that knowledge and make its presence known to have a benefit. So what do we envision? We envision a cookbook. A cookbook which consists of recipes that a research chef will generate for us. And where will those recipes come from? Well, we will take information that we gather in a survey and we will present it. We will present in terms of a culinary theme. For example, we will be investigating how strategies that older Canadians are using across the country, how those strategies impact a person's sense of anxiety or stress. Are those strategies having a teeny bit of effect or a teaspoon of an effect? Or are they having a moderate or tablespoon type of effect? Or are certain strategies really, really effective, most effective, and provide a cupful of reductions in anxiety or sense of stress? And one of the things we'll be talking about as well is the popularity of those strategies. Who is using them? It's the who's who that we want to get at, not just what is being done and how helpful it is, but the who's who. Who is using this? Are more women using a certain strategy than men, for example? Are people who are married versus without a significant partner doing different strategies? So, and what might be the least popular strategy? So we want to be able to identify strategies that are effective at promoting mental health and well-being. And we also want to identify strategies that don't work. And the experts tell us that these are important. They can be lessons learned from others who find themselves in similar circumstances. So, what did and didn't work for some of my peers? And well, maybe those things are working for me. I don't know, but it provides some points of comparison. So it's about information sharing and getting the message out there of what other people are experiencing, what strategies work for them to keep their mental health upbeat, and what strategies are just simply not working that well. The neat thing about this is that we will have a research chef working with us to pair mentally healthy living strategies with certain kinds of ingredients that can be used to make delicious recipes for one or for two. Chef Maynard specializes in helping researchers pair food with survey findings, for example, around mental health and well-being. So Chef Maynard will be looking toward local, affordable ingredients that resonate with him as he looks at the effectiveness of certain mentally healthy living strategies. And he will pair those strategies, either those that are have a teaspoon of effect, a tablespoon of effect, or a cupful of effect. He will be finding recipes that speak to him or resonate with him as he reviews our findings. And another thing that's really exciting is we're going to be asking older Canadians across the country for advice. So thank you for sharing your strategies that you're using and how you're feeling in general. But what advice would you give other people? And that's important. We want to learn from older Canadians. We want to share their wisdom with others. And a way we're able to do that is by inviting advice from participants in our study. And we're calling it Sage Advice because we have a culinary theme. And we will have our chef perhaps suggest a recipe, an easy to make recipe that can be made with sage as a key ingredient, the sage herb. And another really cool thing we're going to be doing with a recipe book is I mentioned previously that a couple of our colleagues from Brazil specialize in mental health webs. They're going to be doing what we call a spider web analysis. So they're going to be mapping out symptoms of anxiety or stress, those that are least to most troublesome, and the strategies that have the least to the most effect on fighting those things. And we'll be using a spider web analogy for that, where a symptom is something that triggers a spider to shoot out a web. And but that web of symptoms can be quieted through adding silk threads or strategies to reduce those symptoms. So we'll be mapping out those strategies using spider webs and presenting those as spider webs in the cookbook. So it'll be really quite interesting thing to have a look at. So yeah, that's what we're aiming to do, to translate our survey findings into a more palatable, reader-friendly atmosphere in this cookbook. Next slide, please. And we want to do this through a survey of older Canadians, and we're looking at also finding a group of older Canadians that represent, through their personal characteristics, the characteristics of other Canadians across the country in terms of their age, biological sex, and their level of education. And that will allow us to match the people that we study according to the characteristics of others across the country. And hopefully by doing that, our findings can have a bigger bang or a bigger effect, that they are going to resonate far beyond, we suspect, those people that take part in our study. So it's a really neat process. It's called multi-stage stratified sampling. And we have a survey company that will be helping us do that, helping us to collect that data in a way wherein people who answer our survey represent the voices of the average Canadian who perhaps wasn't able to participate. Next slide. So again, I just want to come back to our small wins approach. Small wins for us are learning about what mentally healthy living strategies are like for older Canadians. What are they doing to stay well and to keep afloat during this pandemic and as public health measures lift? And well, that brings us to another win. Once we have those things, once we learn those things, we can translate them into a cookbook and offer not just comfort foods and effective mentally healthy living strategies, but sage advice from persons who have walked a mile in older Canadian shoes, and that information be made accessible. And the RTOERO Foundation will be sharing our recipe book and making that available to RTOERO members across the country and to other mental health advocates or older persons, associations or groups that are interested in finding out more about what we learn. So this is a way for us to help other older Canadians feel connected. I almost envision it as a spider web. It's our research community, our collaborators coming together, working with a survey company to gather expertise and knowledge and working with designers and a chef to build this amazing mental health recipe book. And to make that accessible to older Canadians across the country. Next slide. So we're hoping perhaps that maybe when you get a look at this recipe book, when we've developed it, that you might open the book and make a recipe, share it with a friend, and maybe begin some conversations around strategies that have been helpful for you to enhance your mental health and well-being. What a wonderful way to further solidify your connections with people who are close to you. And we're also able to reach out through your sharing your ideas to help other older Canadians across the country feel more connected and part of a larger community of recovery. COVID-19 isn't an everyday event. It just isn't. It's a remarkable event. And I think something that our team is hoping to learn more from you about and to share that knowledge and wisdom with others around the country. So this is a very exciting thing. And again, why food? Why food? Well, experts tell us that mental health conversations are tough conversations to have. Mental health still largely remains a taboo topic. It's just not comfortable to talk about. So we're hoping that by pairing mental health living strategies that older Canadians are using to stay well and to stay afloat during these challenging times and comfort food, we'll just make things more palatable, so to speak. And that's not a pardon the pun, that's a well-intentioned pun. We want to make discussions about mentally healthy living strategies, things that work, more palatable, to share advice to make it more palatable. And it will be sage advice, we trust. So yeah, this is our vision. This is what we're hoping to do in our project. Next slide. So this is what a page in the recipe book might look like. Pairing a comfort food with a mentally healthy living strategy that has been most effective for a good number of older Canadians in our study. Seeking support, for example, might be a strategy that older Canadians in our study are using most often, and one that had the biggest effect on making someone feel less anxious or stressed during these trying times, particularly as public health measures lift. And preparing a hearty casserole with mushrooms and potatoes can be just a wonderful way to celebrate the supportive people in your life. So yeah, we're happy to just share what our vision is as we're moving forward with this, with the work to develop this recipe book. So, okay. And we have the slide in French for participants who are joining us who are French speaking. Okay, Dr. Gutman.
This slide gives you the email if you want to get in touch with either me or Gail or with Donna or Dr. Gao, our other colleague, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have ideas. And we've also put some links to resources that you might want to take a look at. and to get more information about the project. And we really want to thank you for your attention, for coming today to give us a chance to talk to you. And we're looking forward to the questions and answers. And I saw that one that came through that you might want to start answering, Gail, is one that had to do with the timelines of the project and when the book is going to be ready. So Gail, do you want to take that one on?
Yes, we're working with our survey company to start getting our survey platform organized. So we hope to start collecting survey information about mentally healthy living strategies and anxiety or stress levels and some advice this summer. And we should be able to complete our data collection this summer, and then we'll need to knock heads and have a look at or make sense of that information and group it in a way that makes sense, because we could have well over 1,000 participants in the study. So we want to make the information for us containable, and containable in such a way that we can start sharing it with our research chef and our cookbook designer to get things moving forward. So we're hoping that the cookbook or we're aiming for the cookbook to be available next May. So it'll take us some time to gather the survey information and take a look at making sense of that information around mentally healthy living strategies and levels of anxiety or stress. So we'll be having a look at that in the fall. And we'll be having our colleagues from Brazil also take a look at building their spider web analysis and mental health webs for our cookbook. And then we will be meeting with our designer and chef to get those recipes started. We're aiming toward Christmas time to get started on some of those recipes and the recipe development. So yeah, we want to make sure that we're gathering information in a responsible way, and that we are treating that information with the utmost respect and analyzing it or synthesizing and summarizing it in a very accurate and efficient manner. So we expect the recipe book to be available within a year's time.
Okay. Gail, there are a number of questions that have come in about recruitment. And so they want to know, Doris wants to know, will most older Canadians have access to the online questionnaire? So I think you need to explain a bit more about the sampling.
Yeah, that's a good question, and thank you. We are working with a survey company called Qualtrics, and they will be providing us with a platform to enter our survey questions into, and they're going to be looking at sending out advertisements and email invitations to Canadians across the country. They have a group of Canadians who are part of a travel rewards program, and that's how they gather consumer interest in taking part in surveys. So they will be reaching out to those folks and ensuring that those who are responding are adequate in number in terms of age and in terms of biological sex and education. So we have enough people, and we will also be sending out an anonymous survey link to RTOERO members as well. So as the survey planning begins to unfold, and it's a very complex process because the folks that we're working with are Zooming with us. They're in the States and in Vancouver. So we're just starting to get those discussions happening and get things together in terms of planning for our survey platform. So once all those things are sorted and the survey is up and invitations are out, then we will be sending out a survey link as well. Part of our part of our vision is to generate scientifically responsible mental health information. And when we're sharing strategies and their impact, we want to make sure that those views that we're putting out there in our cookbook represent the views of the average Canadian. So the primary arm of our study is going to be finding a sample that is representative of the typical Canadian, so that you're getting information that counts and that is typical rather than extreme or unique.
Yeah,
And
there's really two groups to the sampling. The one is what the survey company is going to come up with, which will represent the population in terms of how Stats Canada counts us. But then there's a second sample that will be from members of this organization.
And the neat thing about that is, as Dr. Gutman is mentioning, is that, well, you can compare the patterns of or trends of findings that we have among RTOERO members, and whether you are similar to the typical Canadian. So it provides a host of really helpful information for us to look at, to present in this cookbook.
Okay, I see a question from Ken Kuhn. Hi, Ken, who's from BC and very much involved with prevention of elder abuse. And he says isolation of seniors during COVID has had many unwanted results, with older adults experiencing abuse and stress and loss of communication and so on. The survey will not have questions that duplicate those that were on the Canadian longitudinal study of aging, for example, where there is a module that's specifically dealing with elder abuse. Here we're more concerned with the general with anxiety, with the day-to-day kinds of things that people are experiencing. So this is not specifically an elder abuse survey, but I would imagine, based on my own research experience, that there will be some examples that may well come out, and that will be important to see.
Okay, so we have one question here from one of the attendees. Do you have advice for managers of the retirement homes or long-term care facilities in regards to assisting residents through the times of isolation they have endured? So over to you, Dr. Gutman first.
Well, again, this particular survey is really targeted to people who are living in the community. Those who are living in assisted living or in long-term care face different kinds of stresses. I can tell you, from some of my other projects, we have just completed a study in which we actually did survey people that were living in assisted living and in seniors housing, as well as community dwelling. But that's not the objective of this particular study. So we will have some of the recipes will be good for everybody, but we're not specifically targeting people that are living in communal settings.
Over to you, Dr. Loh. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I second what Dr. Gutman is saying. We're looking at persons who are residing in the community, but at the same time, if you're wanting to access the resource that we're developing, certainly do so. Certainly reach out to the RTOERO Foundation early next summer to have a look at the resource that we've developed. And one may find some solace in that. Our findings will definitely reflect community based mentally healthy living strategies and their impact, but it would certainly be a welcome thing to share what we've learned with others and to spread the word.
Yeah,
I think that it helps.
Plus, an idea here is that the recipes are something that you can talk, you as an individual or the guy that's doing the cooking for what we're going to eat today can share with a friend or share with the relative, and or where they can come over and do it with you. So it's a little different than the situation where you've got people living in a communal setting where there's a dining room and somebody else is doing the cooking. Now, there may be some tasty dishes in there, but this is more for the everyday person like me, like Gail, who are living at home and cooking for ourselves every day.
Thank you so much for all those thoughts. So we have one more question here. How will the cookbook reach those of us who need the information? There's a lack of connection, seems to be one of the most common problem. So over to you, Dr. Gutman, first.
Well, again, the idea is that the cookbook could be a conversation piece. One of the great values of people having pets, and there's, a lot of people have become pet owners during the pandemic who were never pet owners before. So one thing is having a pet is an excuse that you've got to go outdoors because you have to take the animal out for a walk. The other thing is that if any of you who do walk outside, you keep seeing people with dogs talking to each other. So it's communication vehicle. And we see the cookbook as serving that kind of a function in terms of people saying, gee, I tried the recipe in there and it was good, or I tried it and I didn't like it, or maybe it needed a little more sauce. So there's that kind of a use. And in terms of accessibility of the cookbook, as I understand it, the organization will be making copies of it available to its members. So I don't know if they're planning to do it virtually or to send you out something in the mail, but that's sort of the next stage. But to make sure, our idea in spending the time and effort in doing this is to get it in the hands of as many people as possible. And then the next step is to find out, if it's useful.
Thank you so much. Dr. Lowe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I certainly the RTOERO Foundation will certainly make this product accessible, and we also encourage you to look out as well for an article in a magazine called Good Times, for example. We're hoping that Wendy Half, our health and food writer, will be sharing an article talking about this project and the cookbook and some of the key findings that are key conclusions that we've drawn from learning about mentally healthy living strategies from older Canadians across the country. So there'll be an announcement in lay magazines as well. I believe there'll be one in Renaissance and also in Good Times. So we'll certainly make sure that the release is made public and that members are made aware.
Okay, thank you so much. So I can see in the Q&A box that people are more interested in learning about the elements of the cookbook design for the health, aging, that will make it attractive to those who discover it. So over to you, Dr. Gloria, first.
Well, I think I will give that to Gail first.
Go ahead, Dr. Gail.
Sorry.
Just to answer one quick question, there is an anonymous attendee who said, is the slideshow available to RTO members who joined late? The answer is yes.
Yeah. So can we, Hunina, could we just scroll back to the slide with the recipe book page?
Okay, just a second.
Yeah, so the next one, it would be 16 there, yeah. So what we're wanting to do is to turn some very scientific information into very reader-friendly, usable information. And I'd mentioned before about popularity, the who's who of mentally healthy living strategies, what the most and least popular strategies are, for example, and how much of an impact those strategies have on reducing felt anxiety or stress. So we want to make sure that when we're summarizing our information that we're finding from the older Canadians participating in our study, that we make it palatable in terms of easier to talk about when it's paired with food, and also palatable in terms of using down-to-earth language. That, I think, is our recipe for success. Just making the information reader-friendly and usable. So this is what we're aiming to do, and there'll be ingredients, of course, for the recipe in this bubble that Chef Maynard will be developing for us. He'll be developing up to 5 recipes, and we're looking to have recipes that pertain to strategies that are a teaspoon of effect, a couple of recipes for strategies that have a tablespoon of effect, and a couple of recipes for strategies that have a cupful of wholesome effect on reducing anxiety or stress. So we'll be presenting recipes for the least to the most helpful strategies. So we'll have up to 5 of those. And we're also going to be having a section called Sage Advice, where we will be sharing quotes from older Canadians around what to do to feel less isolated during these challenging times. So we will have messages of hope and actual quotes from older Canadians that we'll be sharing. So, and we will have our spider web section on the most troubling anxiety or stress symptoms and strategies that have the most effect at calming the spider and closing the web off. So that's what we're envisioning. Yeah.
I see Angela has asked some questions about whether there would be recipes for people with special dietary needs. I think, we need to just make it clear that the actual food recipes are a small part and part of a strategy by which people can connect with each other. But the major thrust here are recipes on how to manage stress and anxiety. So it's not a cookbook in the sense of the usual thoughts that, it's page after page of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And but we will have some, in terms of resources. What we can have is an appendix that does in fact give people links to where they could find information if they have special dietary needs. But again, these are recipes for mental wellness and for making us happy and less socially isolated, rather than specifically based on food. Just that food is something that's fun to do with other people. It's much more fun to eat with somebody else than to eat by yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe, Dr. Gutman, Helena, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. We're right at 3 o'clock. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on wrap up. Everybody can hear me still? Okay, so, and thanks to everyone who joined today as participants for all the great questions. As usual, we have a lot of questions, more than we can get to, but I think thank you, Gail and Gloria, for answering as many as we could. Just quickly, I noticed more than a few questions in the Q&A that were asking about support groups for folks that might feel isolated or want to just chat and meet with like-minded individuals. So I want to quickly mention that the RTOERO Foundation actually has developed a program that we called Chime In, and we launched it last fall. Chime In is simply an online chat group that's open for everyone to join. to just meet with other folks, meet with peers. We encourage anyone and everyone who's interested in meeting new people to please explore our Chime In program. Deanna has just put the link in the chat box. So if you click on that link, you'll be taken to our website, find out some more information. You can register there. We have sessions, a couple sessions a week, and we also have a French language session. So please explore Chime In if you're interested in socializing and meeting some other folks. So also, I think we have, yes, we do have the foundation contact information up on screen. I want to mention that our webinars are always free to join. Also, that our presenters, our three folks that joined us today, are volunteers who are donating their time and their expertise to inspire us with these very important conversations. So in order to help us continue to organize these webinars, we hope you will consider supporting the foundation with a donation, which you can do over the phone or through the mail or online. Our information is up on the screen right now, so please consider. Thank you. I also want to mention to everyone in attendance that a very short survey is going to pop up on your screen as soon as this webinar ends. This is for us to collect feedback on how we did today and how we can improve for future. Please take just 1 minute to fill in the survey and let us know how we did today. Thank you. Dr. Gutman, is there anything you'd like to add before we finish? You did a fantastic job.
Well, I just want to thank so very much the RTOERO Foundation for supporting this project. I feel in my heart it's a very important project, and I'm just so grateful to be working with the foundation at this point in time to move things forward and make this vision come to life to benefit others.
We're very excited about it. Thank you, Dr. Lowe. Dr. Gutman, thank you for joining us today. Renana, thank you. Thank you also to everyone who joined as participants in the audience today and taking time to share in our excitement about this project. So again, thank you to everyone. Please stay safe and healthy, and we will see you at the next webinar.